Well, it was the biggest story in the country when a shooter rampaged through a school in Little Tumbler Ridge in northern British Columbia. There were instantly rumors about the murderer claiming he was transgender, but it was hard to sort fact from fiction. Well, our friends at Juno News managed to connect that night with a family member of the killer and learned facts and published them before anyone else in the world, including the massive CBC state broadcaster. In fact, not only was Juno News first, that in the hours and even days that followed, the CBC and other regime media refused to amend their wording. They continued to say a female killer. They continued to misstate the name of the killer, all to serve political ends. Joining us now to talk about Juno News' success this week is our friend and Rebel News alumnus, Cian Bexte, the co-founder of Juno. Cian, great to see you, and congratulations. You guys had a great week.
Thanks, Ezra. I appreciate it. It was an unfortunate situation, but in these moments of human tragedy, it's important that we get it right and we get news out quick and we don't lie to our readers like the CBC does.
I think you're right to pause for a moment and reflect on the horrific tragedy, the loss that the families faced. It wasn't just a tragedy, it was a crime. My compliments are to you, because in that moment, it's so easy to be swept away by what does the CBC say? They must be the most authoritative. They're up there first because they just have so much staff and so much resources. So to pick up the phone and call, even to call the family of the suspected killer, that's an important role. I mean, obviously, the number one part of the story is the shocking murder spree. But I think increasingly how the government deliberately hid information and committed disinformation, that's really scary to me. Like when they send out that message on cell phones to everybody, warning them of a woman in a dress, that's the opposite of what they should have been warning about.
This is just another example of not being able to trust anyone who gets money from the federal government with information that is critical to your life. Whether it's the RCMP, who lied about the woman in a dress when they could have easily said a man in a dress, which would have been super clear to every single person in that town. They would have known exactly who the RCMP were talking about. Right. They would have been on the lookout for it. Everyone in Tumbler Ridge, I used to live up in the Peace region. Everyone there is armed. Everyone could have responded. It could have gone in many different ways, right? The shooter might not have killed himself in the school. Thankfully, the RCMP responded so quickly and got that done. But imagine if this, God forbid, the shooter went on a rampage through the town. People would have needed to know who they were looking out for. And the RCMP obfuscated that intentionally because they bow down to their leadership in Ottawa, not to their leadership in BC. They face the same issue that the RCMP in Alberta have. And then again, with the CBC, parroting those talking points, lying to people point blank, talking about the womanhood of this mass murderer was just disgusting. And again, you just see this time and time again, even from outlets on what I would have thought to be our side, refer to this person as a woman in the very first reporting that they did. Rebel News and Juno News, we didn't make that mistake because we tried to get to the bottom of the story before we started sensationalizing it.
You're nice to tip your hat to us, and I do salute Drea, who did some good work, but the prize goes to Juno for being the first with the interview. And you got a piece of information in that very first interview, and it was Cosmin Georgia of your team, and he was kind enough to come on our live stream the other day. The name of the murderer is Jesse Strang. The RCMP insisted, and the CBC insisted, in calling him Jesse Rootsalar. His biological father just yesterday said that was his legal name, but he never went by it. I was cut out of raising my son's life. He had nothing to do with me, and he had nothing to do with my name. And my theory, Cian, I'd like your thought on this, is the reason the police were so insistent that this guy go by that other name that he never used in life was because if you were to search the name Jesse Strang online, you would see hundreds and hundreds of posts written by this transgender activist. And if you went with the wrong name that the RCMP was deliberately giving out, you wouldn't find it. I think that is textbook disinformation, and misleading. How can you trust the cops after that?
Yeah, we knew we were right. We had backed up the information that we reported multiple times from multiple different places, and we knew we were just sort of waiting for the RCMP to confirm what we knew. And when they came out and said, "Yeah, the name is Van Rootselaar," we were a little bit in shock. We got the first name right. How could we have possibly gotten the last name wrong? Everyone in the town knew them by the Strang family, and they knew, most importantly, the killer by the Strang family name. And the RCMP, they could have said that. They knew that. When they identified the body, they weren't fishing through his pockets and trusting just what was on the ID. They were talking to family, they were talking to friends, they were talking to victims, they were talking to school teachers, and no one was referring to the killer as Jesse Van Rootselaar. But instead of actually acknowledging all the aliases the guy went by, they went with the least information, the least valuable information possible, is what they delivered to people, which is just criminal.
There was such weird stuff like using his first name. One of the CBC presenters was calling this guy Jesse, and then Jesse did this, and Jesse did that. I mean, Paul Bernardo, you would never hear, and then Paul did that, and Paul did this. They're trying to and I played this the other day on my show, that Norm Macdonald joke. He had that joke he told in a different way. It's like, oh, I'm worried if there was a dirty bomb that ISIS set off over an American city, but what about the blowback against Muslims? Well, actually, I think the dirty bomb is the bigger. But you have again, I'm laughing. It's not a funny situation. It's a very sad situation. The obsession of the regime media and the government and the RCMP with being politically correct on pronouns and transgender stuff frankly, it takes away from the gravity of the situation, and it takes away from the victims. I don't know. I think it's really gross what they did.
It's also blaming the atrocities of a nearly exclusively male crime on women,
Yeah.
and on womanhood, which it's just an extreme disservice to half the population to lump these criminals in with them. I'm fine. I know many people in my lives who identify as transgender. Some have had surgery, some have not. I am polite, and I give them the benefit of the doubt, and I treat them courteously, and I use the pronouns that they want when they are good people. But when they are a bad person trying to killing half a dozen people and trying to I don't know if that was his intention when he went and did it, but to sully the name of all women, to be the largest female mass shooter in, I think, North American history, if this was true. That's just not, we owe it to women to be more accurate with the terminology that we use when the people are this deranged and this troubled.